Hello and welcome to EXSC198, Physiological Basis of Exercise. My name is Dr. Phil Chapman, if you don't already know, and I'm the lecturer in charge for this unit for Semester 2, 2019. Lecture 1, Week 1, I've split into two parts. So the first part, I'll be discussing energy, work, power, and the measurement of exercise. So this part is really the basics, the fundamental basics of exercise science and the exercise physiology stream that you'll go throughout this course. So some of it may cross over into biomechanics, which you'll be studying this semester, and some may cross over into nutrition as well. So it's maybe some review, but what I'm doing is bringing together some concepts that are really important for exercise physiology. So as I've said earlier, these lectures will be split up into small chunks, small mini lectures, 5-10 minutes long perhaps, and covering specific topics within the lecture series. So it's really in your interest to look at all those videos and take notes and prepare yourself for this unit content. All right, and if you have any questions, just contact me, and hope you enjoy this first lecture of this semester. Thank you very much, and I'll see you later. When it comes to exercise and exercise science, it's about the understanding of energy and how energy is transferred from one form to another. In fact, the whole universe runs on energy, as we know, and without energy, the universe basically would not exist. When it comes to our area of study, which is exercise science, and that's about the study of human movement, then there will be no movement unless there's some input of energy. Without energy, nothing happens. So the first law of thermodynamics governs this principle, or sometimes known as the law of energy conservation. So it reads, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be transformed from one state to another. So what that means is that we have many forms of energy, and energy can quickly be transformed to a different state. And this is what happens in the human body. And to understand that, then you can really understand human movement and exercise science. And this unit will go into some depth into this energy transformation. We'll be looking at our food and how that's transformed into some form of movement. So over the years, over the centuries, people have tried to invent what's known as perpetual motion machines. So these machines don't require energy input. Once they start, they never stop. Now, intuitively, we know that just does not happen. No one has built a perpetual motion machine, and it was in fact Leonardo da Vinci over 500 years ago who debunked this notion using science that it is impossible to have a perpetual motion machine here on Earth. So here's an example of one where you have the mass of these weights or balls pulling the wheel around, and then it gets pushed up and then it flicks over and starts again. However, when it comes to these machines, there's a lot of friction involved. So you've got friction here, 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 and all these hinges, and then you've got air resistance on these, sort of micro air resistance on these apparatus, and that slows it down and eventually it stops. And the same with this one. We've got friction along these runners here, and noise. We have loss of energy from heat, from sound, and friction. And so a perpetual motion machine is impossible to build. Although it'd be fantastic if we could, we would solve all our energy problems, but no, it's impossible. So we have two groups. So energy can fall into two distinct groups. We've got potential energy and kinetic energy. And as you'll see in biomechanics, you'll discuss this as well, how energy from potential, it could be mechanical, chemical, electrical, gravitational, or nuclear. This is energy that has potential, it's stored. So for example, food is a chemical energy. So the energy is stored in the molecules of the food, in fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. And then that can be transformed or converted into heat and movement, motion, which is kinetic energy. So in this unit and in this degree, we'll be focusing on this conversion of primarily chemical energy into motion energy. And in the first half of this semester, we'll be going into some depth into this chemical process. How do we extract the energy from these molecules of food to actually move? And how efficient is this process as well? Do we lose a lot of energy as heat and sound and other losses? We'll be calculating how efficient we are at moving, in running, in cycling, and so on. So as you know from if you've ever done biology or have ever read anything about biology, you'll know that on Earth, without the input of the sun, life will not exist. Okay, so plants need the sun. The energy from the sun is essentially a huge nuclear reactor that radiates heat and light and other radiation to the earth, and this is absorbed by the leaves of trees and plants to produce glucose, fats, and proteins. So the plants take in carbon dioxide, they take up water through the roots, and using a molecule called chlorophyll, and the energy input from the sun, we have expired CO2, which comes out of the leaves, and it also builds glucose molecules, so the glucose in fruit, in the leaves, and so on, and also fats and proteins within the plant structure that are consumed by us and other animals. So vegetables, fruits, and so on, this is where our food supply comes from, and it has the glucose, fats, and proteins. And all the energy contained in these chemical bonds of these essentially chemicals, glucose, fats, and proteins, so lipids are fats, comes from the sun, originally comes from the sun. So what happens in the leaf is that the energy is transformed into chemical energy. So nuclear energy becomes radiant energy, is transformed into chemical energy, which is our plant food supply. Now, some of these plants are eaten by animals, cows, sheep, fish, and chickens, etc., what we also consume. So they're consuming originally light energy from the sun, they're consuming it, and then we consume the meat of these animals. And so again, the energy is transferred from the sun to the plants, then to the animals, then to us. So essentially, overall, we humans are solar powered. All the energy that we take for granted for movement comes originally from the sun. So where does the energy come from human movement? As I said before, it comes from our food. So anything that we consume, that we eat, most of the chemical compounds in that, which is carbohydrates, fats, and protein, is converted into energy that we can use for movement. So food is chemical energy, and it's stored within the molecular bonds of these macronutrients. So when it comes to humans, chemical energy is converted to mechanical or motion energy, which results in human movement. Now, this arrow here signifies a whole series of chemical reactions to eventually get to mechanical motion energy. And during the first half of this unit, we'll be studying what this arrow signifies. So it actually signifies hundreds of chemical reactions to eventually get to some form of movement, motion. Here is a diagram of what you'll be studying in this unit, and these are the chemical reactions I've been talking about when it comes to the conversion of our macronutrients, glucose, fats, and carbohydrates into some form of energy that can be used for movement. Okay, so up here we've got glycogen, which is eventually converted down here in this what's known as citric acid cycle or Krebs cycle. We've got fats here, fatty acids, comes from our intake of fat, which is then converted. This also ends up in the citric acid cycle, and eventually we get a molecule formed called ATP out of those macronutrients. Also here we've got some protein or amino acids, which are components of proteins. They come in to this cycle, and we can also use protein as energy. So there's some amino acids there, and there's some amino acids here, all coming into here to form this compound called acetyl-CoA, which then goes into the citric acid cycle. So we'll go into this in much more detail in the next few weeks. But as you can see, with all these little arrows, these are the conversions or the transformation undergoing to extract the energy from these original molecules, such as glucose and glycogen. And there are a number of reactions, and every time you have a reaction, when a bond is broken, you lose a tiny bit of energy, which is heat. And that's why we are warm all the time, because we're continually producing heat, because we're continually breaking down fats, carbohydrates, and proteins to extract the energy. But it's not an efficient process, and so we're transforming not only into motion, but also into heat. And we'll be looking at the efficiency rate of that conversion from chemical to mechanical movement.